I admit one of the hardest things for me as a parent sometimes is getting my kids to follow through on commitments that they've made. Anybody else? Yeah, Garrett can feel me. Lydia at 2, just, man, she will not commit to things, will she? Exactly. You know, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's things in the house that we need, you know. I remember several times my kids have said, I want to play a sport. They get into it about mid-season and they're like, I'm kind of done with this. And anybody else experience that? You know,
how about cleaning the room?
Cleaning the room, they have no stick-to-itiveness at all, do they? I mean, none, which is so, and as a parent, how do we get them to commit, you know, to hold to those commitments? You know, and I know as a parent, sometimes it's very hard for me because when my kid is playing a sport and they're like, I want to quit, I begin to think, that's okay. Because then I don't have to take you to practice. And then I don't have to get up early on Saturday morning to go watch a bunch of 7-year-olds play a sport that none of them are really good at. I mean, I'm just being honest here, right? I mean, we're just being honest. But, you know, sometimes my kids will even turn it around and they'll say, I didn't want to do it anyway. You made me do it. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, what do we do as a parent when, you know, the kid wants to give up? Do we force them to continue doing it? Do we say, you made that commitment, you got to finish it? Or do you want to, you know, compassion kick in and be like, oh, my poor little buttercup. You know, I know it's too hard. Let me let you quit. It's funny when we talk about our kids, but it's less funny when we talk about us, isn't it? And just turned that right around, didn't I, Amy? Amy's like, well, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. How easy is it for us sometimes? You know, I was talking with Matthew this morning about something, and he's talking about some training and meetings and things like that, and I went, dude, that would be the hardest thing for me to just not be like, peace out, I'm gone, I'm out of here, you know? Will we be a stick-to-it kind of person? When the going gets tough, will we get going? I think for us in the culture we live in, this is kind of a very challenging thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, we live in a very disposable culture. Everything can be thrown away, you know, and if I don't like it, I'll just toss it and get a new one. I'm old enough to remember in college, I worked at a Christian bookstore, and I remember like people would come in and they'd be like, oh, I'd like this book. And we tried to have a decent selection, but we weren't Amazon. We didn't have unlimited shelves. And often I'd have to say, I can order that for you. And it would take a week to come in. And young people, that's just what we did. Nobody complained. It's just what happened, you know? And today, how many of us would do that? I mean, sometimes it takes Amazon about 3 minutes to download my new purchase to my Kindle. And that's a little too long, you know? So I want it instantly, and I was talking about disposable, but I mean, even we're instant and disposable. And so if I break my cell phone, I just toss it and get a new one. I mean, I remember like a year ago, my washing machine went out. The pump stopped, which is kind of bad. You need to pump water out, right? My clothes were staying just way too wet. Called the repair guy in because I thought, I don't want to just toss it. He actually told me this. I can repair it. It'll cost $1,500. You should just go buy a new one, which we did, which was cheaper than $1,500. I mean, that's crazy, right? So what does all this have to do with anything? We live in this culture that's constantly saying, throw it away, move on, get rid of it. If it's not fast enough, move on. And I think that carries over to life in general. It moves into our relationships. It moves into our careers. It can even move into our families. It can even move into our faith. When our job gets difficult, we just update the resume and move on. When our marriage gets difficult, we don't push through and try to salvage it. Maybe the grass is greener and we just move on. And when life gets difficult with faith, Jesus just doesn't understand. I'll just give up and walk away. We're in this series called Seasons, where we're thinking about the seasons we might be in. Last week we challenged you to kind of recognize the season you're in. And today I want to talk specifically about a specific season. It's a season of perseverance, a season of stick-to-itiveness. I like that word. Now, it might not surprise you, but actually this is something that the New Testament talks a lot about. In fact, as I was studying this week, I saw that it was around 52 times in the New Testament where it's mentioned, Whether you look at the words of Jesus or the Apostle Paul, the writer of Hebrews and Peter, and all these, even the letters of Revelation, or the letters, the other epistles, and even Revelation, it's there. Always this reminder, stick to it, persevere. Let me give you a few examples. In the letter of James, that's what it says in James chapter 1. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. We have an issue with that. We're not going to look at that. Okay? Consider it joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces what? Perseverance. So let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now, I don't know about you, but I listen to that and I'm like, I don't want to be mature. Yeah. I'm okay if I lack something. Yeah. It's fine. If I don't have to go through the trial or the test, that's fine. And yet James is saying, look, in faith, in life, things are going to happen. Things are going to get tough. What are you going to do? Persevere. Because there's things that will happen in and through you when you persevere that you need to happen. It's not only there, we see it in his letter to the Romans. Look at what the Apostle Paul says. He says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. What is it with these people in sufferings? They love to talk about it. He says, because we know that suffering produces what? Perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Again, I think we're tempted to go, I'm okay if I don't have much character. Hope, maybe I want hope, but I don't want to be hopeless. But the other stuff in the middle, I don't know. Do I need that?
According to the transitive property.
Yes, according to the transitive property, we do. We can't get to hope without going through there. Then we look to the book of Hebrews is another spot. Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, if you remember Hebrews 11, the writer there just goes through, remember this person and this person and this person, and they had such great faith. And then we get to chapter 12. Because of all these people around us, this great cloud of witnesses with such great faith, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with what? Perseverance, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. There's a lot of words in there. We're going to look at some Greek words real quick. I'm learning some things today. Hupamune. You like that word? Hupamune. It's often the word translated perseverance, and it also can mean endurance. What comes to mind when you think of endurance? Running. Exactly. You know who I think of? Bailey, right there sitting in front of me. A few weekends ago, you know what this crazy woman did? She goes to Kansas City and runs a half marathon on Saturday, and she goes to Des Moines on Sunday and runs a half marathon on Sunday. That's crazy. She wasn't the only one. Adam was with her and did the same thing that weekend. I think of running. I think of long distance running, because it takes a lot of endurance. I admit there was a season in my life where I ran. And honestly, there was a day I was outside running, and I asked myself this question: why? You are a grown man. There's nothing chasing you. You hate this. You absolutely hate this. Your knees don't feel great. You are out of breath. It is cold outside. So I stopped, and I went home. Bailey, I wish I had what you had. Matthew does this too. I'm like, yes, you guys have endurance. Endurance, that perseverance. And you've got to have it, don't you? Because there is a moment where you get to where I was, and you have to make a different choice. Because I think it doesn't matter really which race you're running. You hit a wall. You get to the place you want to quit. Your body is tired and you think, I have nothing else in the tank to give. Bailey, I don't know how you did it the second day. I'd have had nothing to give. I'd have started with nothing in the tank. But endurance says, it's worth it. It's worth it. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. And there's often another word that goes with endurance that we often see together in the Bible. And that's the word patient. patient endurance. And that word just makes me angry. Anybody else? Because when I have to endure, I just want it over. I want to cross the finish line of this season. I don't want patient endurance. I don't want to be reminded yet again I'm not in control. And yet sometimes I have to be reminded I'm not in control. And so James and Paul and Romans and the writer of Hebrews all use this word to remind us that sometimes in life we just have to patiently endure. It's another word that the Apostle Paul also liked to use. We see it like in 2 Thessalonians. There were many places he used it. This is just one example. And he says this, he says, "So then, brothers and sisters, stand firm. Hold fast to the teachings we passed on to you, whether by word of mouth or by letter." Stako is the Greek word. Stand firm. Hold your ground. You might not be advancing, but you aren't retreating either. Can you think about how that would be an important word sometimes when it comes to persevering? Not everything is moving forward. Sometimes it's just being able to stay where you are and hold fast to where you are. Which, sorry, I said hold fast, and that's the third word that we see because it's in that same verse. Krateo. You like that one? Great Greek words today. Hold fast, seize, grab. As I was looking at the root of this word, it even talked about being arrested. Think about being arrested, grabbing, seizing someone, and how that could impact us in perseverance. This is the white knuckle grip on the rope in the midst of the storm. That's sometimes what perseverance looks like. Isn't it interesting here, and we've got one more we'll look at in a second, but isn't it interesting that there are three really important aspects to perseverance? Sometimes it's hitting the wall and moving forward. Sometimes it's just not getting knocked down. And sometimes it's white knuckle holding on just because you're holding on to dear life. And all these words mean essentially very much the same thing. Persevere. Don't give up. Keep going. There's one more. It's kind of the negative. We see it in Galatians chapter 6. Paul uses it this way. He says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Ekakeo, I think is the word. And it can be translated, lose heart. And so you often see it with the negative in front of it. Don't lose heart. Don't give up. Keep your heart strong is what this means. That is a really rounded definition of perseverance, isn't it? Because what do you think of when you often think of don't give up? You probably think of just one of these things, when really perseverance is all these things. And we could have included more ideas included in this, but endure, stand firm, persevere, remain steadfast, finish the race, hold on, don't give up, don't lose heart. All these things are saying the same thing. Like I said, it's at least 52 times in the New Testament we see this. Why? Why do we repeat instructions to our children? Why do we repeat instructions to hard-headed coworkers? Because they need to hear it, don't they? We forget, we lose focus, we're distracted, whatever. We need the repeated instructions because life is going to come at us. Life is going to get challenging and hard. And then we have to determine what type of person are we going to be. The type of person that sticks it out, that perseveres, that persists in what we're going through, or the person that gives up and walks away. It's easy, right, to give up and walk away sometimes. It's hard to push through. Just thinking about this, because life does come at us. A lot of times in surprising ways. I mean, nobody sits down and says, well, I'm going to plan my life and here's the things I know are going to happen to me. No. How many times have you just been dealing with something that comes out of left field and just smacks you in the head? And you just find yourself reeling, not knowing where to turn, not knowing what to do, anything. We face these kind of trials. We face these difficulties. We face suffering. And the reason we talk about this is, even though it's not a popular message, we know it's reality. I mean, I would much rather be up here and have you come to church today and for me to tell you, you know what? Follow Jesus, and then everything is fine. You never have to suffer. You get the job you want. You can drive the car you want. Your bank account, I mean, basically you think of a number and it'll just appear. I would love to be able to tell you that. And I think, man, if I told you that, this room would be packed out every week, right? People just dying, desperate to hear that message. But we all know reality. We know truth. If you've taken 3 breaths in your life, you know reality of suffering. And so what causes us to maybe want to give up and walk away? What causes this discouragement in our lives? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I thought let's just put some things up there that maybe we need to be aware of. First one that came to my mind, and maybe it's because it's, okay, you can look at this list as being like, Brent's just speaking of a place of his own stuff. Okay, I'm fine with that. Comparison would be my first one. You know, I look at others and they seem to be doing well, and not just well, they seem to be doing better than me. You know, and that can be a source of discouragement. That comparison can be like, you know what? What's the point of doing this? I've given so much to Jesus. I've given my life to doing this stuff. And for what? What have I gotten in return? You know, look at that person. And it can go 2 ways. It can be, look at that person who's following Jesus, who seems to have it easier than me or be more blessed, #blessed than me. Or it can even be worse, where I look at the person that's not following Jesus and they seem to have a much easier life than me. And I go, Comparison can be a little tricky, can't it? I love there's a story at the end of the Gospel of John where Jesus is restoring Peter. You know, Peter's denied him, and Jesus goes to Peter and he's like, hey, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, yes, Jesus, you know I love you. And Jesus is like, feed my sheep. Jesus does that 3 times with Peter. And at the end, Jesus basically tells Peter, things are going to get rough for you. You know what Peter's first response is that we have recorded? What about that guy? He looks at John, he's like, well, what about him? And you know what Jesus says? Jesus may not have had any children, but he gave the perfect parent answer. It doesn't matter what I do with him. All that matters is what I'm asking you to do. It's a great story because it's a reminder that, you know what, you're always going to be tempted to look around and compare yourself to others and how good or how bad others have it. And none of that matters. What matters is what you are doing in your faith in response to Jesus. Others are not our measuring stick. Their outcomes are not our measuring stick. Ours is a life of faithfulness and patient endurance. Which leads to another cause of discouragement, I think, not just comparison, but I said this one earlier, impatience. I mean, do we really have to talk about this? Anybody just willing to lift a hand and say, Brent, I'm with you, I am impatient. Amen, thank you, I am not alone. You know, if you're not an impatient person, I am comparing myself to you and jealous, okay? So now I'm 1 and 2. And we see this all around us in immediate culture. YouTube Shorts and TikTok have programmed us to have short attention spans. And good grief, if Amazon makes me wait till tomorrow to get my package and not deliver it this afternoon, now I'm agitated, you know? But how much do we have to rely on God's timing? How much do we realize that we can't control some things and we just have to rely that the one that is in control we can trust? I think there's another one too. Just cause of discouragement, exhaustion. Yeah. Sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you're just worn out. You know, just going through life, being married, raising children, working a job, following Jesus. Whew, just makes me tired thinking about it. You know? Nowhere in Scripture are we called to run ourselves into the ground physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You know, we live in a culture that sometimes says, you know, well, if you haven't hit the wall, keep going. But I heard years ago somebody say to me, he said, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is get a good night's rest. And I think that is true. We can't do really anything from a place of exhaustion. And if you are exhausted and not resting, you are going to find yourself discouraged. I mean, I think it's, again, why God worked into our seasons and into our calendar, into our week, a day of rest. Seasons of rest. Not when you need it. Do you hear me? It's the rest not when you need it. It's before you need it. Okay? Can we agree on that one? Yeah. God's trying to help us here. I think another thing that causes discouragement can be just a loss of hope. We need to acknowledge a big difference, too, between just discouragement and a loss of hope. There can be significant mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual things going on. And if we get to a place where we have no hope, we need to know we aren't maybe going to be able to discuss ourselves out of this. We need to seek help. Talk to someone, a pastor, a friend, a therapist, whoever. But sometimes we get to the end of ourselves. And if we get to that place, we need to understand it. We'll be willing to give up, but maybe even so much more. But we need to try to remember that even when all seems lost, that when things seem like the darkest, the cross seemed the darkest. And how much of our lives are living in Good Friday and waiting Saturday? We live a lot of our lives there, don't we? We want to live on Easter Sunday, and we should, but sometimes we just live in Good Friday, where it seems like death in the end and nothing good, but it is coming. And our encouragement is to hold on. I think there's a few other things we could throw to our list, and I'll just put them all up there. I think compromise is one. I think cynicism is one. It's not a spiritual gift, but man, I lead towards cynicism sometimes. It's not great. And I realize when I lean into my cynicism, man, that is just one step away from just throwing up my hands and walking away. And we need to be aware of the guilt and the shame that we might be bearing, because that will cause us to want to give up too. Have you gone through a season and you look at it? And I'm not saying it's not something that you've done. Sometimes it is. But I would say most of the time it's probably not. And yet you feel like I've done something. I've screwed up. This is my fault. God's getting back at me for this. And when we get to that place, guess what? That's where we might be tempted to throw our hands up and just walk away. Sometimes our suffering, sometimes our trials just happen. Can I say that again? Sometimes our suffering and our trials just happen to us. But they also give us an incredible opportunity to turn to God. This is where the rubber meets the road for faith. Sounds like a really trite Christian saying, doesn't it? Oh, are you suffering? Turn to God. Put that on a bumper sticker. But this is where we figure out whether we really believe what we're saying.
Yeah, that's true.
And can I tell you, I don't want a faith that just is trite sayings and expressions that sound good on social media posts and bumper stickers. I honestly believe when life kicks the absolute hell out of us, turning to God is the only place we can go. Because, and I would love to tell you, here's the 3 things God will do for you. I'll tell you this, I don't know. Because that's the bigness of God that we serve. I know that when I have turned to Him, I have found comfort. I have found peace in ways that I can't even describe. In moments where I shouldn't be feeling peace, God has somehow supernaturally spoken into my life through Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And some way, somehow, I know that even though I am going through hell, God is saying, I've got you. And I'm like, okay. We need an inexplicable, inexplainable faith. We need an inexplainable faith. We need encounters with Jesus that the world looks at and goes, tell me how that happens. And we just have to go, I don't know. But what I do know is it's happened. God has brought me through. God has given me something I couldn't have experienced otherwise. That's the faith I want. That inexplicable faith that God just moves in and brings something to me otherwise I wouldn't have had. That's what I want. How about you? I was reading this week and came across a book somebody gave me. I'd read most of it before and I was drawn back to it. Dallas Willard, it was written after he died. They took some of his teachings. It's called The Scandal of the Kingdom. Thanks, Lori, for that book. And there's a chapter in there called Persistence as the Prerequisite to Growth. And I thought, what's the difference between persistence and perseverance? And of course, Willard gives us a good definition. He says, perseverance is the inner resolve to keep going, and persistence is the outward action or steady effort despite facing obstacles. And so really, when we talk about a season to persevere, we can't just talk about having the inward resolve. That's great. That's where it starts. But then you got to do something. You got to move. Willard says that the abundant life only comes through persistent, strenuous, and well-directed action. And then he gives us 4 areas, and I'll just mention these really quickly. He says, here's 4 areas we need persistence in, where we might look to give up, where it can take us off track. And he says, you know what? You need to be persistent in forgiveness. And I think, okay, that's a good one. Because is there anything that can knock us off of our game quicker than holding a grudge? Someone hurting us. I mean, please don't raise your hands. But it wouldn't surprise me if most of the people in this room have a story of church hurt that they could share. Some Christian, some pastor, some leader, somebody somewhere did something to you that caused you pain. I was even telling somebody this morning, one of my stories where, I remember a pastor lying about me to others in the church, bold-faced lying, wasn't even close to true. I confronted him on it. I was in a group of people. I can still picture in his mind, Carrie probably remembers this, down on his hands and knees as he crawled over from one side of the living room to the other to beg my forgiveness, when in less than a month he turned around and did the exact same thing again. Yeah, we've got those stories. Hurt, pain from others makes us want to just throw our hands up and say, I'm done. But what frees us and releases us to keep going is the willingness to forgive. Is our desire to give up motivated by real hurt that God is inviting us to release to Him and find not just forgiveness for the person who did something, but freedom from the hurt and the pain for ourselves? I think so. Another area of persistence Willard mentions is persistence in service. I like this one. How many times do you just have the wind knocked out of you and your first reaction is, that's it, I give up. Yeah. And we stop doing everything. If you're exhausted, yes, stop. Take a breath. It's okay. But sometimes we need to lean in. Cutting ourselves off is the most natural thing we can do, but maybe the most healing thing we can do is look beyond ourselves to the needs of others and see how we can serve them. He talks about persistence in prayer. There's another one that's quick to go. Anybody ever had a season where you've prayed and prayed and prayed and it hits the ceiling and bounces back to you and you think God is silent and He's so distant you can't even see Him. He's so far away. I remember a season where I prayed, I swear to you, I felt like, when I prayed, I would just say, God, I am tired of praying this prayer. But it is where I am, and it's the prayer that has to be prayed. Breakthrough does come, but we have to be persistent in praying. Jesus tells us the parable of the persistent widow in Luke 18. Just be that persistent. Don't give up. And then Willard lastly mentions persistence in humility. Realizing we're not in control. Recognizing where we are. Sometimes we feel justified and yes, and sometimes we just need to take a breath and go, oh, that's right. I'm human. Recognize our limitations, our powerlessness, our reliance on God. And then what Willard says is this. He says that persistence muscle, that perseverance muscle needs to be worked out. You got to do it. Doesn't grow on its own. I look at Anthony and I think, how many times do you have to work with kids and adults? And it's repetition, right? It's do that again and do it again and do it again, because as you do it again, you're developing the muscle memory, the repetition to keep going, to not give up. Usually the adults that don't do it, right? The kids are easy. I love it. But it takes practice. And we do it because that's how we persevere. So what do we do now? How do we get going when the going gets tough? I think we have to begin with our focus. Remember those causes for discouragement? That comparison one takes your attention. Well, what about Tim? Take that focus and look at Jesus. Look at that Hebrews passage we read earlier. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. He's the pioneer, the starter, the beginner, the author, and the perfecter, the finisher of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured. He endured the cross, scorning its shame. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition for sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In those moments, I get it. We want to throw the biggest pity party that exists. Woe is me. And you probably have a right to. Yes, in that moment, life is hard and sucks. But look to Jesus. He's been there. He's dealt with the difficulty, the hardship. He's suffered. I mean, even as he began his ministry, his own family abandoned him. He was a constant target for attack and ridicule. He suffered abuse, torture, an unjust trial, mocking, embarrassment, desertion by his closest friends. Whatever you are experiencing, Jesus can relate. He is the sympathetic Savior. And keeping our eyes on him can keep us, can help us from growing weary and losing heart. We endure because Jesus endured. And we work out that muscle. Pastor and author Eugene Peterson once asked the question, do you think of Christian faith as a fragile style of life that can flourish only when weather conditions are just right? Thanks, Eugene. That's convicting. I read that and I thought, I think I do. He goes on to talk about perseverance, and he says perseverance doesn't mean perfection. It's not resignation. It's not putting up with the things the way they are, or staying in the same rut year after year, or being a doormat for people to wipe their feet on. He says endurance is not a desperate hanging on, but a traveling from strength to strength. And then he says this, perseverance is not the result of determination. It is the result of God's faithfulness. We survive in the way of faith not because we have extraordinary stamina, but because God is righteous, because God sticks with us. Did you need to hear that today? We persevere not because you have great willpower, not because you are so strong, but because God is. And God is faithful, and God will see us through. Can I ask you a few questions just to think about? What obstacles might be in your way? The obstacles that you're facing that might be temptations for you to stop, to veer off the path, to give up. What's something you can do to persist regardless of where you are? What can you do this week to put one foot in front of the other? And then lastly, how are you relying on friendship and community in this season? It's a good question, right? You don't have to go through this alone, nor should you. And if you are, shame on you. Stop it. Look around you. You may look at a bunch of people in this room and you think, I don't know them very well. Okay, so what? The fact that you're here is an invitation for anybody in this room to walk with you through whatever you're going through. I give you permission to walk up to anyone and say, will you walk with me? I need to talk to somebody. I need some help. Anybody in this room say, don't put me in that list? Don't talk to me? I didn't think so. Because they need it as much as you. That's exactly right. Worship team, come back. Can I get you, rest of you, just to close your eyes for a second? I'm going to close with Isaiah chapter 40. Listen to the words of the prophet. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow weary or tired. and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary. He gives strength to the weary. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men and young women, they stumble and they fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Those who are hoping in the Lord, those who are having their strength renewed, you are the ones, you will soar on wings like eagles. You will run and you will not grow weary. You will walk and not be faint.